Okay, today we're with Ben Turner. Ben is a nutritionist and personal trainer, and also an endurance athlete adventurer who has completed some notable feats, including the rope climb of the Three Peaks Challenge. So, climbing a rope, the equivalent height of the Three Peaks Challenge in the UK, which I could imagine would be some bicep burn indeed. And also, he has completed 16 marathons over 16 days in the 16 UK national parks. And that's just a couple of the notable feats that Ben has completed over the last few years. So, Ben, it's great to have you here, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out. It's great.
Yeah, it's good to finally meet, man, because we've chatted a few times over the old Instagram and social media, but never actually had a proper sit down conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's gonna be great. And yeah, thanks for such a great introduction. I like food, I like fitness, and I have a bit of a passion for doing crazy things. I think that's a way I would sum it up. But you make it sound so much better.
You know what? You sound exactly like me. Food and fitness and fun. That's what it's all about, man. So,
100%.
yeah, man. So you're a nutritionist. So the people listening to this podcast are going to be interested in nutrition. It's not really a topic that I've delved into too far so far with the people I've had on. But I suppose we can maybe start with sort of what would you advise people who are perhaps maybe going to do their first marathon, maybe they're looking for nutrition for recovery, for maybe training for a 5K, I don't know, something like that. What's your kind of take on things then, Ben?
Okay, good question. Good place to start. I think, look, nutrition gets vastly overcomplicated by far too many people, and it's not the fault of the person who wants to improve their 5K or get better at a marathon or look to recover. It's more this weird situation that we find ourselves in social media where the tip of the wedge just sells, and people will sell the tip of the wedge solution without actually looking at the rest of the situation. Now, it seems to only be in social media and on the internet that exists, because you're not going to start building a house by putting the chimney on top. You've always got to do the foundations first, right? So when we look at sports nutrition, well, you just knock the sports word off and you start with nutrition, healthy, balanced, variety, a good diet of food. Whether you want to eat, animal products or not is entirely your prerogative. There's no difference in a healthy, balanced diet when compared with an omnivorous one or a plant-based one, vegetarian, pescatarian, Martian, whatever diet choice you want to have. There's no real difference. The core basic principle here is get some variety and enjoy what it is that you're eating, because food isn't just fuel. Food is fun. And I think that needs to really be hammered home so that people aren't stressing out about, oh, well, I need to eat X amount of grams of carbs. I need to count these macros. I need to look at these calories. I need to weigh this. And all of a sudden it takes 3 hours to make a sandwich. When instead you're just like, I just want cheese and pickle, and I'm just going to eat that. And understanding, I think it all boils down to two things. And that's two things I will teach any human being ever that comes to me for nutrition. What makes up the food that we eat, the impact that it has on the body. If you can integrate that to a healthy, balanced diet with plenty of variety, plenty of hydration, then what you've just done there is found the weird elixir that people are looking for in terms of nutrition, how to live and eat healthily. You have an understanding of what makes up the food that we eat, and the food that we eat is made up of protein, fats, carbohydrates, micronutrients, your vitamins, your minerals, and water. And that's it. When you look at the impact that food has on the body, then yes, that's where we look at recovery, muscle regrowth, digestion, healthy gut. How do we avoid things like bloating and cramping and other bits and pieces, and how that fits into your lifestyle? A lot of that is down to a little bit of trial and error. If you eat bread and you start, bloating out and you've got an issue with that, probably don't eat bread. But it's where people start to look at, oh, well, actually, if I cut out gluten, this is where I can maximize performance. And a lot of this is such rubbish. And all it does is serve to just confuse people. And I always say, look, when we're looking at trying to improve our performance, if we are training as an athlete, amateur, whoever you are, and you want to do some more training that is more physical than going to work and doing your normal daily life, start with the basics. Healthy, balanced diet, plenty of fruit and vegetables, plenty of hydration. It's insultingly simple. It's incredibly hard to jazz it up and make it sound sexy so that people will buy it. But that's where you start. And when you then look at your training, well, actually look at the intensity of it. Okay, what are the core principles that we need to understand here? If I'm doing an intense session, I'm probably burning glycogen, which is the body's stored version of carbohydrates. That's going to go into the muscles. If I work the muscles, it's going to leave the muscles. I need to eat something to replenish the muscles. Simple, basic understanding of carbohydrates. Protein, okay, I'm going to work the muscle and the muscle is going to get bigger and I'm putting it through stress and strain and stimulus. Well, as that muscle starts to break down, we need to help rebuild that through the synthesis, the creating of muscle protein. We can help the body create protein by eating protein. So what do we need to do post-exercise? Eat some carbs, eat some protein. There's no real difference here between the sort of supplementary role of going through, let's say, powdered carbohydrates that you can get in a supplement form or supplemental protein in comparison to a tuna mayonnaise sandwich. It's just having that basic understanding to be like, okay, well, I'm exercising, so I need to refill the tank and I need to rebuild the engine. It's like when you go for a long drive in a car. Okay, I'm going to drive from here in Shropshire all the way to Scotland and back. No, that's going to be my exercise. Well, before I go, I'm going to make sure the tank is full, put petrol in the car. As I go, I'm going to make sure it's adequately fueled because I don't want to break down on M6, put petrol in the car. When I get to the end, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to come back again. When I've parked the car up, I'm going to put petrol in the car to make sure I've got a full tank. And then because I've just covered 1,000 miles in the car, I might send it in for a service and make sure the engine is working the way it should do. Same principle for the human body. I think it gets vastly overcomplicated. It's very, very basic in terms of where we can start. Understand what makes up the food, the impact that it has on the body, and then add more when we're looking at training, especially if we're training for performance. I hope that was a very long-winded answer.
No, I liked that. That was really good, man. And I liked the analogy about the car filling up the petrol tank, keeping it topped up, making sure you're not going to run out of fuel. And I think you hit the nail on the head at the start when you basically opened up saying it's overcomplicated, so we just need to keep it simple, but at the same time have a good variety. Two things that you see happen, which is exactly what you're saying there, are that people have either too much complication and it's too hard to stick to a healthy whole foods diet, or they have too little variety. So without getting into the dogma of different diet types and stuff just now, but the people have very restrictive diets. You know, they're cutting out large food types and stuff, food groups, and it can be detrimental as well. So yeah, really good, man. So on that subject about keeping the tank full, quite a common mistake you see in people that are aspiring to do maybe their first marathon is they'll run out of glycogen, won't they, in their muscles, and then they bonk or hit the wall, you know. So what would your advice be for somebody who is training for a marathon? Just simple kind of advice from nutrition.
Cool. So I'm going to start with, you've got two different types of people. You've got the people who, with the greater respect, just don't quite know what they're doing with their nutrition. Fine. This is trial and error. This is where we can find out what works. This is where we might make some hard lessons. Then on the other side, you've got the person who will be like, oh, right, well, I've got a 5K training run, so I'm going to smash 3 gels for breakfast and a coffee, and then I'm going to go. Both of which are, with the greatest respect, just a little bit confused in terms of those principles of nutrition. And that's absolutely fine. This is where my job comes into play, to help educate these people to make sure that we are doing the right thing and we're not getting missold PPI on the internet. So when it comes to training for our marathon, well, the first and foremost thing is making sure our habitual diet is adequate. I'm going to go back and hammer the drum of the baseline fundamentals again. Healthy, balanced diet, plenty of variety. If we are looking at going out on let's say a Saturday long run, and our long run at the moment is, let's say, approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours. So we're going to break the hour and a half mark. We're going to go out, it's perhaps where I am here in Shropshire, we've got some trails, we've got a couple of hills, you know, it's not dime flat, we're not in Norfolk. So we've got some interesting touching into different training, what's the word I'm looking for? Training systems. So some parts are going to be harder than others. There are other areas where we're going to be able to get into cruise control. When it comes to fueling that, you want to make sure you start with a full tank. And that doesn't start from breakfast. That starts from the 24, 48 hours before. If we know that, you know, a 2-hour run is probably pushing it for us in terms of distance and effort, and, you know, we're trying to overreach and we're trying to do it properly and we're going to bring that back, recover, and then periodize and progress, then we need to start upping those carbohydrates just slightly over those aforementioned couple of days. If we have a nice carby meal the night before, let's say, for example, tuna pasta bake or some noodles or something that's high in carbohydrates, you're going to help your glycogen stores be tipped up ready for the next day. Then when it comes to the morning of the run, you want to make sure you eat something. One of the things I see uncomfortably too much, or an uncomfortable amount rather, is fasted training on the internet. And you'll always see it on these Facebook groups and all these webinars and forums and things like that about how people like, oh yeah, I'll go out for a 30-mile run. I just won't eat anything and I won't drink anything. And it's like, great. The one thing about nutrition is if it works for you, crack on. If it's just a bonkers idea, my argument would be stop sharing it to people, because someone else will see that and be like, whoa, 31 miles, didn't eat anything, didn't drink anything. Am I overeating? Am I making myself fat by training? Am I doing too much? And they'll try something, and it's highly likely you're going to do exactly what you just said there, run out of glycogen, go headfirst into a wall, you're going to bonk, and you're going to have a really unpleasant time. Now, how do we manage that? Eat something before you go. Highly recommend. Roughly 1 gram of carbohydrates per kilo body weight, roughly 2-ish hours before you go. That bit is entirely dependent, the sort of duration. There are some people who are weird, who could just eat food and crack on. I can't do that. I need to leave about 45 minutes and I'm good to go. Other people need to leave 3 hours. Eat something before. Simple carbohydrates, low in fiber, because fiber equals some form of gut function. If you're giving a stimulus to the gut by eating fiber, then A, blood is going to the gut and not to the working muscles, and B, you're giving yourself a fast track ticket to the bushes or to some sort of gastrointestinal distress, burping, farting, you name it, those sort of things can happen. Normal biological processes, but it's a bit like if you pick up a washing machine and shake it, if your gut is the washing machine and running is shaking it, then you're going to lead to some form of discomfort. So then what do we need to eat while we're running? Well, if your training session is under an hour and a half, you don't really need to eat anything. You're going to have enough glycogen to feed that, but it might be if you're doing a really, really hard, and I'm talking a very hard interval session, let's say you're doing 8 times 800s, which is disgusting, and it's really, really pushing you hard, then maybe you're going to benefit from having some form of very, very simple carbohydrates, maybe a gel or maybe a block or maybe a piece of fruit along that way to help. But generally, anything under 90 minutes, you don't need to fuel. If we're going over 90 minutes, which we are in the case of this run, then you're going to benefit from eating along the way. So when we're training for our marathon and we're pushing that longer distance, sure, we want to avoid that glycogen depletion to the point of bonking or hitting the wall or just genuinely feeling like you've been hit by a train. So you do that really by eating carbs and some protein along the way. There's what the science says, and then there's what a normal person would say in terms of recommendations. Now, the science is going to tell you, 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour, every hour when you're on the run, which is fine if you're maybe an Ironman triathlete and you're used to fully pumping gels and a lot of carbs. But if you physically look at what 90 grams of carbs looks like, that's a lot of carbohydrates. And if you take that out of, say, gels and energy drinks and things, and you're left with food, that's a lot of food to eat. That's nearly an entire loaf of saurine, or is it half a loaf? I think it's nearly an entire loaf of saurine per hour. That's a lot of food. So my sort of rule of thumb that I find works most with some of the clients that I work with is 40 to 60 grams of carbohydrates every 40 to 60 minutes. Gives you some flexibility. I tend to favor like a more whole foods approach. I just don't like gels. By taking some dates, some nuts, cereal bars, things like that are simple to eat, easy to process, and you just keep grazing away at them. If you're consuming that rough amount, 40 to 60 grams of carbs every 40 to 60 minutes for the duration of your run, then you're going to be okay. There is also another side of this to sort of play devil's advocate with. And another reason for hitting the wall is just pure exhaustion, which can't necessarily be fixed by nutrition. Sure, nutrition can really, really, really help. But if you're simply not used to running that duration, that intensity, and that time over and over again, then your body's going to be like, well, I'm not conditioned for this, so of course I'm tired. Otherwise, we could just be like, oh, I'll pump myself full of carbs and food, and I'll go and pick up half a ton, and then I'll go and do a sub 4-minute mile or something ridiculous. You know, because of that, there's an element of what we can do, what we're trained and conditioned to do. And that's where a good periodized training program comes in. In terms of nutrition, just keep taking on some carbohydrates and don't get drawn into this fasted training fad, because fat adaptation and fat loss and all these things. When you look at fat adaptation, you're only really looking at something that's potentially beneficial for real ultra marathons. And I'm talking 100 miles plus. Anything under that, carbs are king. Everything over that, then yeah, potentially there is a benefit here for fat adaptation. But for the normal everyday person trying to train a marathon, carbs are always king, and trying to keep them going throughout the run. No matter what Joe or Jane says on Facebook, trying to eat 40 to 60 grams every 40 to 60 minutes is going to keep you fueled. And obviously then you've got hydration on top of that.
Some great points there, Ben. Really, really good points, actually. And that fat adaptation thing you mentioned there, completely agree with you. It does have a small benefit, even for that kind of ultra endurance, in my opinion. Even the benefit then is so small that it's almost not worth the potential negative effects that can have on your overall health. Because not a lot of people are aware of this, but it can actually affect your hormone levels. It can burn you're burning a lot of calories on an empty tank. Not necessarily always the healthiest option, especially for the majority of the population. And if you think, the way I think of it is this, right? If you're training for an event, is the event you're doing, are you going to be stranded in the desert? Okay, maybe you're doing the Moab or the Marathon des Sables or something like that. But even still, you're going to have food all the time. You're going to have aid stations. You're going to have nutrition on you. You're going to have support crews and whatever, you know. So, I mean, maybe on some of the big adventures like that you're doing or planning on doing in the future, you may have to have a bit more fat adaptation, but even still, it's probably not worth the risks, is it? So, yeah, really good point, man.
I think with fat adaptation, you know, there's a difference between fat adaptation and an adaptive metabolism. And fat adaptation is quite simply the body's ability to burn fat as fuel. And having an adaptive metabolism or a flexible metabolism is where your body can use both carbs and fat effectively. If you try and use, so how can I put this into an analogy? If you've got the human body and it can take on carbohydrates and it can take on fats, and funnily enough, because it's a clever evolutionary device, it can use both and it knows when to use both. If you stop the tap on one of those and go fully on one of the others, whether that's carbs or fat, then you're going to bring the efficiency of that other fuel being burned into question. If you look at an Ironman triathlete or a proper Kona world champion Ironman triathlete, they're not going to be doing fat adapted training. You're not going to race Kona on peanut butter. You're going to race Kona on carbs. You're going to race Kona on lots of carbs, because that is how you're trying to, it's a very, very high intensity sport for a bloody long time. If you're looking at doing, let's say, Zach Bitter's record for the 100-mile trail run, then you're probably going to burn a bit more fat. But if you solely look at one over the other, your body won't be as good at burning the other one as it is carbs. So if you just focus on carbs, Ironman triathlete, eat gels before I go for a run, I'm carbs, always in a caloric maintenance, never in a deficit, so I'm always burning carbs. Your body's going to be terrible at using fat for fuel. Equally, let's go keto for endurance. Right, okay, I'm just going to eat fat. I'm going to lose all my friends. I'm going to have smelly breath, and I'm going to have a poor diet. Oh, actually, my body's now terrible at using carbohydrates, and that performance for high intensity surges, hill climbs, surging past people is going to be brought into detriment. So there's a difference between fat adaptation and the fad that is really, and having the ability of the body to burn both fuels at the same time. Now, you can play with that in a more advanced training plan. If you're looking at, okay, we've got a more competitive marathoner, then yeah, we can start looking at training carbohydrate fasted. maybe once, maybe twice, but I personally wouldn't go twice a week, once a week. And that's where you're depleting glycogen, but you're not depleting calories. There's a difference between fasted training and carbohydrate fasted training. All carbohydrate fasted is glycogen limited. We're training with plenty of calories. We're just eating more fat and more protein, but the body has less stored glycogen. That has a benefit in improving that fat adaptation and making you a more efficient machine. The difference here is it's once a week, not 7 days a week. And for the average Joe or Jane on the street who's training for a marathon, probably not necessary. But for those who are trying to push it a little bit further, then under the guidance of a nutritionist or a PT who knows what they're doing and actually do it properly, that's where the benefit can come in. But what you see on the internet, and I'm sure you'll agree, is one extreme to the other. It's either, no, carbs are king and we must only have carbs, or it's, no, keto has changed my life. And there's no middle ground.
Dual fuel source. That's the premium fuel, isn't it? Talking about the old car analogy, it's having that dual fuel. So you can fuel yourself on carbohydrates or fats or both. And generally speaking, both is always going to be the best option, isn't it? Especially
100%.
Especially for the longer endurance events. And yeah, you're 100% right. You look at all these different fad diets out there, and then you follow where do these fad diets lead you to? What kind of books do they lead you to, and what kind of supplements do they then lead you to? And it's like you follow that money trail, and all of a sudden you're like, right, okay. And let's look at the long-term results. That's what I always look for when it comes to nutrition. The long-term results of people that have been doing things for a very, very long time. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see, oh, this guy's lost a kilo of weight in 6 months or whatever. It's like, great, well done. Okay. And then, problems then start to roll out down the line. So yeah, really good points there. Going back to you mentioned that you predominantly fuel yourself on whole food sources, which I really like as well. I do that. All my training runs pretty much I'm on whole food sources, dates, bananas. I like fruit, some nuts, sometimes some nut butters, and maybe even like a peanut butter jelly sandwich now and again, on the longer ones. For races, gels can be much more convenient, especially if you're competitive and you're wanting to go faster without having to wolf a sandwich down. But let's just go back to, you mentioned having a good breakfast before a big run. So what would be a good idea for a breakfast? Like maybe, I don't know, a banana and porridge or something? What would?
I think breakfast recommendations, you'd look on what it is you're trying to train beforehand. So look, I've got some clients who will get up every morning and do a fairly intense CrossFit session, and they came to me and they're doing it fasted to start off with, just because they maybe don't feel like they can stomach food in the morning, but they're seeing a dip in their performance. They're feeling more tired. Things are happening because the body is constantly tapping into that glycogen, and funnily enough, not being fully recovered. It's a bit like, I'll run my car, but I'll constantly keep it a quarter of a tank rather than fully filling the tank one day. And we had a quick change. We changed a few bits and pieces. We looked at habit-based approach. We looked at some things. And one of the things we changed was, look, just get up slightly earlier, have your coffee, but as you have your coffee, have a banana and just see what difference that makes. And all of a sudden it was like, I actually feel better for my workout. I have to leave it at, half an hour or 45 minutes, but I feel better. Well, why is that? Because we've put carbohydrates in the system to be burnt for that workout. So as much as there isn't that much carbohydrates in a banana, there was enough to fuel that exercise plus whatever was in his glycogen store, rather than just limiting him to whatever was in that glycogen store, which could potentially have been at that point suboptimal or not on a full tank. I think it's very much subjective when you come to your breakfast, but there are a couple of underlying principles you want to bear in mind. Carbohydrates, you get different types of carbohydrates. To put them into layman terms, you've got more simple and more complex carbs. On one hand, you've got the simple carbs, your white bread, oats, rice, whatever, and then you've got your more complex carbs, which is your whole grain sort of side of life. The thing with complex carbohydrates is they're also quite high in fiber. And fiber, as I said before, well, fiber is fantastic to have in your body and definitely have it into your daily nutrition. But when it comes to that pre-workout, If you eat some fiber, so what makes up the food we eat, the impact that it has on the body. If we eat some fiber, it goes down, goes into the digestive system. What that's then going to do is, because it digests slower and through different processes to, say, a piece of white bread and some honey, then you are then putting more stress on the gut bacteria, on the gut machinery. Brilliantly healthy for every day. But pre-workout, what you've just done there is turn the washing machine on, and you put it on for a 40-degree cycle, and that's now going. Whereas when you eat some simple carbohydrates, eat, I don't know, white bread, banana, honey, done. If you eat that, it's going to empty the stomach pretty quickly. And because you're going to have a more rapid spike in blood sugar, that blood sugar is then going to go to the muscles. It's going to be primed, ready to go, and we're not stressing the gut machinery. Because of that, the washing machine only goes on for a 15-minute sport cycle. It's done, and we don't have to think about it when we come to going for our run. But if the washing machine is still on a 40-degree eco cycle and it's going on for a couple of hours, and then we then go for a run, that's exactly the same as just picking it up and shaking it. And as you're doing that, you're putting more stress on the body and potentially going to lead to some form of GI distress. So you want to limit those more complex carbohydrates in your breakfast, and thereby limit that fiber in your breakfast. Now, in my opinion, some people are different, but I would also suggest limiting dairy, that lactose milk pre-workout, simply because it's got quite a lot of protein in it. It's got quite a bit of fat in it, and lactose can cause some upset in the stomach. And we want to try and limit that as much as possible. So if people listening to this are the sort of people who can oh yeah, I can have cornflakes and milk and I don't have a problem, good for you. You've found what works, don't change it. But if you're like, oh, actually, I've heard milk's good and it's like super hydrating and it's high in protein, so maybe I should drink it, but you feel a bit like, ooh, little bit bloated maybe after, then limit milk and dairy products before. So what would I say as an option? Well, eggs on toast are fantastic because you're going to get some protein and you want to get some carbohydrates. White toast is not an enemy. White toast serves a purpose. White bread, it's always called the dirty white bread or the processed flour or whatever. It serves a purpose. Super fast, hard-hitting carbohydrate source. It's going to help fuel the effort. With eggs on top, you're getting a good bit of protein in there. You want to get some protein before a longer session because you're going to help negate the muscle breakdown and the damage later on. Equally, porridge. I personally like porridge made with water, and then I'll put bits in it like mashed banana or something like that. The thing with porridge is it's quite easy to overdose it with a lot of calories. And that's not to say that the calories are bad. It's just you're putting a lot of volume into your stomach and the body's then like, hang on a minute, I've got to deal with this. Whereas oats and water, it's a lot lighter, pinch of salt to give it some flavor, and then just mix something in it. Mix it with jam, honey, banana, whatever you want. Makes a really, really good little bit of rocket fuel before you go out on your workout. Equally, you could do smoothies, you can do other bits and pieces that might be more sort of liquefied, so a little bit easier to digest. But equally, there's an argument here for peanut butter and banana on toast. Okay, peanut butter is higher in fat, but I would suggest that element of fat is pretty good for a very long distance run. If you're going out for a long, slow, easy run or recovery run, if you just so happen to like banana and peanut butter on toast, then you're onto a winner.
Good options there, man. Good options. And yeah, you mentioned the fasted training thing again there. And the way I look at it is, if you're training fasted all the time, right, and you're wanting to be competitive and get faster, let's say you're training for a 5K and you want to get a faster 5K. If you're going out every morning and just training on an empty stomach, are you going to be able to do your speed workouts as hard as you would if you had a banana and a coffee beforehand? Of course not. So you're actually limiting your performance in those training sessions and potentially your recovery as well, depending on how you look at it, how quickly you get through them afterwards. But my view on it is, like, fasted training, it can be used similar to you. I would recommend people, like, if they're going to do fasted training, an easy recovery run, for example, easy 5K recovery run, totally fine. Go out and do that and then have some breakfast afterwards. But if you're going to be doing like an interval workout, like you said, definitely getting some food in beforehand. You're optimizing your own performance there, which is going to optimize your performance in the race. And then I like we were talking about the whole fiber. You didn't go into too much detail about this, but How many times have we been to a park run or a race and you see people diving in bushes to go and do a number two, you know? Or
Oh yes.
I've heard so many stories of people like really good runners or cyclists, whatever, and they're saying, oh yeah, I almost had a 10k PB. I got halfway through and then I had to stop and go to the toilet. It's like, what did you have for your breakfast? Oh well, I had some yogurt and I'm like, they just have no understanding of nutrition and what the body needs before doing these kind of events, you know. So it's really simple, but at the same time, it's just educating yourself, isn't it? And seeking the advice where necessary. So yeah, man, some good stuff there. Really good stuff on nutrition. Why don't we kind of sway into the side of, obviously I mentioned in the introduction that you're a big endurance athlete adventurer. Why don't you tell us about some of your stories from the past? Maybe you've been to Iceland as well, haven't you? You cycled around Iceland. I bet that was interesting for nutrition.
I've had some fun times. I'm very, very grateful for some very fun times. And I guess it all stemmed from, so I used to be in the army once upon a time. I was in the army for 7 years. I left in 2018. I spent 3 years trying to join the SAS. It was trying to get out of my unit. I was trying to do everything I could. I was, at the time, I was supremely fit because I was just training all the time. But I had zero knowledge of nutrition. But I had I had a feeling that, you know, whole foods, plenty of vegetables, lean proteins was the way to go. So that's just what I ate and trained loads and loads and loads. Now, the joining of the SAS, it didn't work out for one reason or another. It was 3 attempts. And one thing I did find that was the underlying lesson that left me, or the biggest impact that it had rather on me, was I really loved pushing myself really hard. I came to the conclusion that I was only on that course. I only went on selection to get absolutely thrashed because I didn't think my battalion could do it hard enough. So I was in charge of the training in my battalion once upon a time. And, you know, I don't want it to sound like I was bragging, but I was in the intelligence corps. We're not renowned for being the fittest people in the world. With the greatest respect, you know, they didn't have the most physical job in the world, like, for example, the parachute regiment or the Marines or the infantry. That's how I'm going to caveat that. But, you know, I would get the fastest PFA, so the fitness assessment. I'd usually be at the front of all the phys sessions. I felt good. I felt strong. I felt good. So I went on this course and just got absolutely hammered, and it was fantastic. And I just wanted more and more and more. But I realized I definitely wasn't there for joining the regiment, for joining the SAS. It was not the job that I wanted at the end. It was more the physical beasting that I wanted from it. And it all came down to, I managed to get a deal with my boss at the time that if I designed something for him, in return, he would let me have 6 months living on my own at the battle school in Brecon. And that got okayed. And I was just like, okay, bye. And I packed my car, went off to Brecon, stayed at the infantry battle school there. So I ate for free. I had my own room. There was a gym there that was 24-hour gym. And I was riding the Brecon Beacons. I was in heaven. And every day for 6 months, I didn't leave. I just trained every single day. I was cycling, I was running, I was swimming. I'd go tabbing in the hills. I'd go to the gym. I'd do recovery, just sit in my room and binge watch Strike Back on TV. I'd eat well, and I just felt fantastic. And there was one day where I went out for a tab, which is basically a fast walk, slow run with a really heavy rucksack on. And I just thought, I'll just go out for just a quick session because it was meant to be a recovery day. And in my Bergen, you always have the kit that you're required to have for selection. You might as well. So in there was like sleeping bag, bivy bag, food, water, you know, the drills. And I found myself hiking around, and I watched the sunset, and the sun was setting. It was a red sky, and I plunked my Bergen down, and I sat on it, and I was like, do you know what? Life is good. This is good. I like this. And I got my bivy bag out and just stayed there the night, and got my stove out and cooked some boil in the bag rations, and just had a great time. And then, okay, the selection course didn't work out. I ended up then, that started the process of leaving the army. But I thought, well, during my training, I decided it would be a fun idea to enter ultra marathons with my rucksack on and just be like, I rang them up and said, Trail Events Company, hello, do you mind if I tip up to your race and run it with a rucksack on? I've got all the safety equipment, I've got the know-how of the map and compass and the bits and pieces, and I'll have all the food. It'd be really good if you could stay until I finish. And they were like, yeah, sure, come on down. So again, with the naivety of nutrition, I tipped up at the first one in Dartmoor. I had a double McDonald's breakfast about half an hour before I set off. This was Nutrition 101, and cracked on. I just thought, this is great. And it was hard, and I went through all the peaks and troughs. I have written the book on peaks and troughs with Haribo and the sugar crash and the sugar spike and all this sort of thing, because I have experienced those to the max, to the point where you slump down and you're automatically just falling asleep because you're absolutely hooped. And I loved it. I got to the end of each race and I was like, I like this. And that just sort of spurred me on to doing the next thing and the next thing. And I did 5 of those ultramarathons that year. I just booked the next one, and then they ended up letting me come back for free because they thought it would be quite fun. And then there was one race in the Brecon Beacons where I didn't come last, and I was like, well, maybe I should try running a race, because I'd never run a race in my life. I was like, I'll try running a race. So I thought I'll enter the Glencoe Sky Race in Scotland on the World Sky Running Series. I thought, give that a blast. Entered, paid, tipped up. I went climbing 4 days before with an old friend of mine, and we did one of our hardest climbs. I slipped off, hit my foot, jarred my ankle, and I was like, that's not good. So I spent 4 days sat with a foot in the sea, trying to cool it off and trying to recover it while eating pot noodles and reading a book. Again, Nutrition 101. I then tipped up on the Sky Race, and I did it with peanut butter and jam sandwiches. I ran out of water. You have all of these different lessons on nutrition. I got to the one feed station and just annihilated crisps and saurine and stuff, and then finished the race. And I again felt absolutely amazing. I was like, what can I do next? So then I did like you said before, the 3 Peaks rope climb. I gave myself 10 weeks to train for that. That was when I started to really hone in. Okay, how do I train? How do I eat? And this is where I got some help from Ross Edgley, because he had just done the world's longest rope climb. And I thought, I want to do the world's second longest rope climb. And he helped me train for it. And it was a real lesson in, specificity, how to properly train, how to break down the movements and do it properly, how to eat for strength and all these bits and pieces. And then straight after that, I was like, well, what's next? So that's when I went to Iceland, and I had literally the best time of my entire life. And that was solo bike packing, 3,374 kilometers around Iceland, I went with the idea of creating this new route that wasn't just the ring road. It took in pretty much the majority of the coastline, all the wild places, right into the Central Highlands, really, really remote. That's why it was 3,373 kilometers. And I gave myself 28 days to do it. So there were some days where it was, 250 kilometers in a day, which was a humongous day, and other days slightly shorter, but they were all above 100 Ks a day. And bike packing, so everything's packed on the bike, light and fast, go as fast as I can, have a really good time. I got lost, nearly died, ended up in a hospital, got rescued, got a taxi. I was cycling along the road with some humpback whales breaching next to me, and had this I don't even know how to describe it. This just amazing Zen moment in this beautiful warm day about 50 miles south of the Arctic Circle, and there are humpback whales breaching, and I'm cycling along my bike, having not seen people in 3 days. It was just you've got tears coming out your eyes. You're like, what are you doing? What's going on? You just can't help it, because it was just such an amazing moment. And it's just kind of never left me, really. But it's all of these things that I've done, I've just made up, simply driven on the fact that I love doing it. I love pushing myself to the next level, or to see what I can do. And through each iteration, I've dialed in my nutrition a bit more. Okay, that took longer than the training, but I've dialed in my training, then I dialed in my nutrition, and that's what brought me onto MNU to, actually become a nutritionist and figure out how to do it properly. And it just keeps growing and growing, and I just keep trying to find the next thing. And if people look at me and say, that's mental, then my opinion is the right thing to do.
It's an amazing place, Iceland, isn't it? I loved it when I was there. I didn't do any crazy adventures like you, but it's just I can imagine it. It's such a wild place. It's just wild, especially once you get up into the more remote areas. when you were doing your ultra marathons with the Bergen on, you didn't do the Wheeler Trail Marathon, did you?
The which one?
The Wheeler Trail Marathon. Did you do
that? Which ones did I do? So I did Exmoor, Dartmoor. These were back in. Oh, this would have been in probably 2015.
It's a bit earlier.
Maybe.
There was a guy. I just big memory there for some reason. It came into my head. I was doing the Wheeler Trail Marathon, which is it's a 28.5 mile marathon. It's a marathon. It's technically kind of like an ultra, but it's got a good few thousand feet of elevation. It's quite tough through the old boggy up to Cheviot. You know the.
Okay, nice.
In the middle of winter, so it's like knee high bog and stuff. It was great fun, type 2 fun. But there was actually a guy there, and I'd passed him twice because he was right at the end with a Bergen on full rig. And yes. I just thought, I wonder if that was Ben, but then there's obviously more people that are just as crazy as you out there, man.
That's good. That's awesome. I've never run around there. It's one of those places that I've really wanted to go to, but it's good to know that there are fellow crazy people who like to beast themselves.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. So so you've done a lot of good adventures, and what have you got coming up then? What's on your radar for the future? Let's hear it.
I've decided to give myself a bit of a mental year, and I was meant to try an attempt setting a fastest known time for the Cape Wrath Trail in Scotland last year. Cape Wrath Trail, for those who don't know, super remote trail from Fort William to Cape Wrath in the remote northwest Highlands of Scotland. Cape Wrath is like the most northwest point of the mainland, and Fort William is kind of home of the Highlands, I guess you'd call it. Really remote, and it's been on my radar for a while because it just struck me as the perfect adventure. Really remote, really hard. 20% of it's like completely devoid of trail. The rest of it's pretty gnarly. There are some hills to climb. There's no signal, and it's in breathtaking scenery and in a place that I love. I love the Highlands. I've been there every single year, multiple times a year since I was small enough to breathe. That's just what we did when I was a kid, and that's why I ended up living there for so long. So to me, it was just like, I've got to do that. And I thought, how far is it? 230 miles. Let's do the maths. Let's figure out how I can do this. Well, actually, if I can do maybe 6 miles an hour, how can I break this down? How can I do the maths? Okay, I reckon I could do it in under 70 hours. Okay, what does 70 hours look like? Okay, well, that's 1, 2, 3 days. Okay, roughly 3 days. I reckon I could do that. And then I looked into what the fastest known time was, and then I learned about Beth and Damien and their amazing feat, and I watched their video and studied everything they did, and then figured out, because I didn't know who they were. I was like, oh bloody hell, they're quite good runners, and they did it in just over 4 days. Whew, okay, I'll stick with my plan. I reckon I've got it. And the difference is I was going to do it. It has to be classed as a supported fastest known time, but I was just going to have a car that joined me at the road intersections along the trail, throw some food at me, put a sleeping bag around me if I needed a quick sleep, and then I'd be on my way again. So there'd be no actually support on the ground, but I supported at fastest known time. There is no supported fastest known time, so it was a great opportunity. 2020 happened, and 2 weeks prior to setting off, I was ready, I was fit, I was just about to run the West Highland Way, actually, as a final sort of training run, if you like. And I wanted to do this thing of running from Fort William to a burger joint in central Glasgow, which is absolutely amazing. Meeting an old friend and then driving home via a spa hotel for a massage. That was my idea of a perfect weekend. That was what I had in mind.
Just to put that into context for anybody into this, the West Highland Way is 100 miles over pretty rugged terrain up the coast of Scotland. Not the coast of Scotland, but the west side of Scotland, up through Loch Lomond and all that kind of area.
Beautiful trail.
So as a training run, that's it's a big race for a lot of people, So
well,
yeah.
I mean, I know it sounds all like really, really grand, and I'm very action man, but it was a case of, well, can I drill 6 miles an hour continuously for 100 miles, and then I need to add in resupply times. I'll stop at the Real Food Cafe in Tyndrum for breakfast. I'll have a stop at the Falls of Falach where I'll have a car ready waiting for me. Okay, great. Well, I can break this down logistically. So in my naivety, it didn't sound too hard. sure, if you're going to go and race it and be like, I don't know what the record is for it, but I think it's going to be something ridiculous like 11 hours or something, then yeah, I think the intensity and the sort of hardcoreness of it is definitely there. I just kind of felt like it was just well, if I can drill this pace that I've been practicing for months and months and months and months and just do it over some similar terrain to that of Cape Wrath, then that's going to be a good training run. And I'll eat a wodge of calories when I get to Glasgow and eat all the burgers. And then I'll just come home. So that just seems to be my approach, really. It's just a case of, well, I never find that I don't know how to put it really. I'm not sort of tainting myself with the records and the opinions of other people. And I think to an extent that was a flaw from last year, because I went in and be like, I'm smashing the FKT, I don't care. And now I've actually had a discussion with Damien and Beth and got some advice and actually got a bit more into the running community. And there's a different attitude to be had there. But I think I'm still going in with that naivety of, I can do the maths. If I can just maintain that pace, how hard can it be? And I think if you go in with that mindset to anything, then you're going in with a more simplistic understanding of it. And you just understand the mechanics behind it rather than the opinions. And I think that can be a really, really powerful tool when it comes to, trying to plan to do so. When I went to Iceland, I was like, oh, bloody hell, 3,374 kilometers over 28 days, do the maths. How does that break down? Get a map, break it down. I'd never been to Iceland before. I didn't know what the terrain was like, but I guessed. I was like, well, okay, if I can do 230 kilometers on that day, then I need to do a shorter day on that on the next day, and so on and so forth. And you just kind of go in with the naivety of the mechanics and a positive attitude. And I think you can pretty much get it done. And that's the attitude that I had with the West Highland Way. If I had been around with people who were constantly saying, whoa, man, you're going to run the West Highland Way. That's miles. That's really hard. This guy's got the record here. He said this guy bunked here. Then all of a sudden you're tainted by those feelings of like, maybe I am going to be tired. And funnily enough, I am not putting myself on the same spectrum here whatsoever, but I have listened to this man's audio book at least 20 times. When David Goggins says that he goes in to do Navy SEAL Hell Weeks and stuff, and they're always saying, by Wednesday, you'll be absolutely hooped. By Wednesday, by Wednesday, by Wednesday. And they constantly saying that. Then the recruits going through are going to get to Wednesday and be like, I am knackered. I am broken. I am tired. Whereas he went in with a different mindset of like, well, by Wednesday, I'm going to kick ass and I'm going to make sure my boat crew's doing a real good job. And I'm going to make sure I break the souls and whatever it is that he says in his very extremist, but very true way of mindset, motivation, and drive. If you go in with the same mindset, it's just going in with a bit more of a naivety. It's like, well, by Wednesday, I'm going to perform. It's like when I do the Cape Wrath Trail, I'll do it in under 65 hours. That's my target. That's the naivety of it. The maths works. And that includes breaks and rest. So in a very long way of answering that question, this year, Cape Wrath is coming back, and it's going to be done in September. But I've also got the idea of, I'm currently just nursing a little bit of a niggle in my Achilles. So I'm coming back into running after a couple of weeks off, which if we're going into any form of tip, one top tip I'll insert here is if you do ever have any niggle at all, get it seen to immediately, because it's just not worth pushing through it and just be like, oh, it'll be all right, which I am attitude 101, by the way. Oh, it'll be all right, because it always gets worse. So, lay off the running, get it fixed, crack on again. So yeah, for this year, after I've done this, this niggle's pretty much over, so I'll be running again this week. I've got a few long distance trails I'd like to run. So I live in Shropshire, so we've got the Shropshire Way. That's 201 miles. The Severn Way, again, is a prime example of my naivety to these trails. Well, the Severn Way is 220 miles, but it's following the River Severn, and you're going from source to estuary. In my opinion, in my understanding, that's all downhill, isn't it? So how hard can it be? The Offers Dyke fastest known time I would like to attempt. That is a very, very competitive fastest known time, but I'd like to give it a go. And there's a bit of family history along that long distance trail. So that's 168 miles. Beautiful trail, absolutely stunning. Goes all the way along the Welsh-English border. And a few other bits and pieces like that. But I'm also starting a outdoor fitness business this year. So that's kind of putting a few of my other challenges, like a return to Iceland, for example, and a attempt at an off-road Land's End to John O'Groats. That's probably going to happen later on in the year / next year. But for now, it's going to be a lot of running, culminating in the Cape Wrath Trail, and then there'll be a bunch of little cycle routes in there as well. But probably nothing over 200 miles, I think. So that'll keep it to a weekend.
Yeah, nice, man. I'm looking forward to that journey unfolding. So, and that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about this journey when you set yourself up for these so-called crazy challenges. It's all that preparation, all that training that you then, it's like, right, I'm going to go and do this crazy event, right? Why? It doesn't really matter why. What you're doing is you're setting yourself up for, in my opinion anyway, a better life experience. Because what
100%.
else are you going to be doing? You're going to be sat watching Netflix, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. You know, you could be, or you're just going to sit and scroll on your phone, or you could go out and explore the wilderness, you know, test your limits. And man, yeah, David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, for anybody who hasn't listened to that.
Oh, yeah.
So on that as well, the mindset, like that's kind of what you were touching on there, wasn't it? That mindset of going into something and how you're going to overcome the challenges that are inevitably going to come. But the way that you approach that, if you approach it positively or negatively, that mindset influences your body. And that's actually a scientific fact as well. It's not just David Goggins doesn't just make this, he kind of made this up on his own, but they've actually proven that if you think something in your head, like this is going to be painful at, say on a marathon, oh, I've heard after 22 miles, you hit the wall and you're going to start. If you say that to yourself, you're probably going to do that, you know. So you have to go in with that positive approach, don't you? So looking forward to those challenges unfolding. What's your outdoor fitness business that you're picking up then, Ben?
So I've got a partnership unfolding with another business here in Shrewsbury that creates. They basically create exercise racks and squat racks and things like that. So they do a big deal with the military, and they're trying to get into the civilian world. So we're going to partner on that, and we're going to start bringing outdoor functional fitness classes to Shrewsbury, and then I've got a plan to expand that to the other towns around Shropshire, and we've got a really, really, really positive and a very, very good business plan put together. So I've just managed to secure the funding, and that's going to be starting in less than, well, when we can, but probably going to be mid-May, actually. I assume that we're going to be opening. Take it how it comes for the summer, you know, what with restrictions and how that's going to play out. But I think it's going to be a really, really positive move. And it links. So I work full-time as a nutritionist at the moment. I run my own business, but I think that gives it the extra element. So we can help provide fitness and opportunities for social fitness outdoors for people through summer after a year of being locked down. And then you can help people on the nutritional side of life with coaching, with other bespoke things, make a membership, make it online, break down all the barriers that are acting as resistance to people for consumption of information as possible. And I think it's going to be really, really positive, and it's a lot of work, but it's, really exciting for the next couple of months. I'm going to be run ragged, but it's going to be a very, very, very exciting couple of months for sure.
That sounds really good, man. That sounds really good. And a couple of things there, the outdoor fitness scene. First of all, at any time, and regardless of what's going on with the restrictions and stuff, training outdoors is way better than indoors, isn't it? You know, it's in a natural environment, fresh air and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, the UK weather is a little bit of an issue, but I'm sure you can set up some marquees and stuff if people have got problems with that. But at least that as well is it's going to give you that freedom, hopefully, to even if there are restrictions in place, you can still get people in and train. You know, people can still go to a gym, because right now, like in the UK, gyms are closed everywhere, aren't they? They have been for some time. And unfortunately, many people use that as an excuse. And that's all it is. It's an excuse not to go, you know. But everybody's different. Everybody's got their own ways of doing things. If somebody needs a gym to motivate them, then fair enough, you know. So that's good, man. I'm looking forward to seeing that unfold.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm really excited.
Yeah, that sounds really good. So I know you're a big fan. We touched on David Goggins' book there. I know you're a big fan of books altogether. You've got your own book page and stuff that you're starting up. But why don't you tell us some of your favorite books, probably on the subject of what we've been talking about, maybe adventures, endurance training. What would you recommend to people to have a dive into?
Sure. So I love books. I started an Instagram page for this book club. It's a very, very slow burner, partly because I am terrible at posting on social media, but also I just haven't had the time. And to be fair, I know it's just an excuse. I am the sort of person, I can't read a book and just memorize it. There are people who can do that. I envy them greatly. When I read a book, I have a folder of notes from those books. And that's how I absorb information. And the majority of the books that I read are science textbooks, actually, I need fact input. But there are certain books, that accounts and autobiographies, that are just brilliant. And they work to really sort of feed the fire as to what you feel is going to be possible to do. And I've always been a fan of Ranulph Fiennes. I'm a member of the Geographical Society and of the Transglobe Trust. And I've always gone to their talks, and their talks always spark just a little bit of inspiration. I just find, the saying that says, "Oh, you'll be the sum of the 5 people or the 10 people or however many people around you." Well, I think that is strongly influenced by books as well. We don't have 5 or 10 people around us at the moment, but I'm talking to you on the screen. I've got my phone, social media. I've got books around me. I've got YouTube. I've got people I talk to. I've got text messages. These are all people around you. And I think if you start surrounding yourself with good books too, things to read about, heroic people to read about, amazing feats, then it's just going to feed your imagination to do things. I've got one book, it's not on this shelf, it's on somewhere else, but it was one that was, I think it was called Extraordinary Expeditions Around the World. And, there was a part of my life when I was a young kid that I wanted to be an explorer and Ray Mears at the same time. And I started reading these books from a young age, and it just kindles that little bit of fire that grows inside you for an inspiration. So recommendations. Well, I strongly recommend that people read or listen to. I think listening to was great on long runs. Ranulph Fiennes' book, My Heroes, or it's just Heroes. I think it's just Heroes. So Ranulph Fiennes, Heroes, and he talks about his heroes. And when your hero is talking about his heroes, it opens you up to hearing about these people you never thought or never realized existed. Not necessarily the people by name, but also the situations they found themselves in and the stuff that these people have done. It's a pretty raw book. There are some quite raw chapters, but it is unbelievably good for really kindling some inspiration. I've also, what else would I recommend? Without going into exercise physiology and training for the uphill athlete and things like that, if I have a look at my bookshelf, I like personal development books. And that's not because, I need to be personal development and turn into one of these coaches. But these are, again, things you're going to surround yourself with. I've read cover to cover multiple times Brendan Burchard's book, High Performance Habits, and they will have a true impact on your life. You're looking at these and going, okay, well, how can I apply this to me? How can I apply this to how I run my life and how I operate? So you start learning these things, you're picking up these things, you start improving yourself. And the more you improve yourself, the happier you feel. Now, I think there's a caveat to be drawn, and that's something I've only learned this year, is I can't remember, before this last year, I can't remember the last time I read a fictional book. And I was bought for Christmas the Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and the Silmarillion collection. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I'm an absolute geek. I've watched the films and grown up with the stories since I was a kid. And I started reading these books, and just, an hour every night of just reading these, you get an escape to some faraway fictional land. Really, really helps your mindset when you're constantly reading and studying or training and doing things and working. To just have a little escape is really good. And the Silmarillion of all of the books, I think, is the best. And it's just a way that you can kind of just completely escape from everything else that's going on in the world, all the stresses, all the rest of it, and then have a nice peaceful sleep. It's a good pre-sleep practice. It's going to help calm your mind, de-stress your body, and it doesn't feel like work. I'm quite guilty of sat in bed with a head torch and and a textbook and a highlighter. And that, that's not relaxing. I'm going to bed and I'm thinking about metabolic stress, and it's not, it's not relaxing. So as much as I do love facts, I think personal development, something that's going to really inspire you and fire you up, and a little something every now and then that you can just escape the world in, I think is a really, really good little mix.
Yeah, I love that, man. I like to have a few books. I've actually got Training for the Uphill Athletes just sat here in my little home gym. I've always got that there. I like to have a few different types of books, and you're 100% correct. When you're winding down in the evening, you don't want to be working. You don't even want to be reading. There is an argument you could say that if you're reading something science or something factual and you're trying to retain stuff, that could be positive because you go to sleep and then your memory retains that. But you need to wind down, man. You need to have some kind of escape and some kind of way to chill out, and that's a great positive way to do it. It's much better than people would say, oh, what's the old thing in Matilda? Why read a book when you can get it from the TV in half the time or whatever the saying is? And it's like, it's a totally different experience, isn't it? It's I like autobiographies for my kind of more escapage stuff, and then I've got a lot of personal development books and running books and fitness and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, good mixture.
I like audiobooks when going out on long rides or long easy runs. And on that note, if you're going to get what's it called? If you're going to get Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, get the audio version, because the audio version, he's working with, I can't remember the guy's name now, it's gone, but he's on he's on another podcast, isn't he, with Rich Roll. Anyway, I digress. They turn it into more of a radio podcast kind of audio book thing, and they really delve into a bit more offshoots of the chapters. It's really, really good, very, very motivating. And if you go out for a run and you listen to that, you'll come back instantly with a six-pack. So that's just the way it works. It's a really, really good listen for running, or if you're going to go out for a walk in the morning, or just to try and get some time where you can focus on what they're saying. I'd strongly recommend that for sure.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's a great audiobook. I've listened to it a few times myself, and I don't tend to listen to audiobooks when I'm running. For some reason, I just have this real thing where I like to just listen to the sound of my feet moving and the wind and the birds, the trees, whatever, But I do listen to audiobooks like in the kitchen if I'm cleaning or cooking, if I'm driving anywhere, sometimes on the bike if I'm commuting to wherever. And people don't realize, but there's a lot of time you have where you can get this either inspiration, education, whatever it is, and you can get that. And podcasts are great as well, aren't they? And obviously everybody subscribe to this podcast and listen to this on your when you're on your runs, But no, brilliant, man. Good recommendations there. Good recommendations.
You're 100% right as well about the sort of time in the day as well. I was a civil servant working for the police last year, and it was an hour and a half commute to get there. And sure, it would be easy enough to have a coffee in one hand, be listening to some music and just, fine, and the miles have disappeared. But instead, in that hour and a half, well, actually, that was good time to listen to podcasts, self-development, listen to a book, listen to other things going on in the world. Then, it's almost like you're stealing time because you're dual tasking. That's not to say, don't concentrate on the road, always concentrate on the road, but you have that ability to listen to other things going on at the same time. And it's, to do that on a commute there and back, that actually became the best part of the day, funnily enough. But you're right, in the kitchen, when you're cleaning, when you're cooking or whatever, then there's always time to sort of maximize that time for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I was commuting 3 to 4 hours twice a week at the weekends when I was traveling up and down south, and I was listening to audiobooks on double speed. So I actually you can actually increase the speed on the audiobook, and at first it's like whoa, then you actually tune into that quite quickly. And funnily enough, you can, in some ways, you can actually retain more of the information because it's coming in so fast. You're like, and I was getting through a book on every journey. It was great. I was just smashing all sorts of personal development books and all the old Think and Grow Rich and all them.
Oh, nice.
Loads of stuff. And it was great. It was brilliant, man. So Yeah, some great recommendations there, Ben. Really love that. I don't want to keep you for too much longer because I know you've got a busy day. You've got your stuff going on, your business to run, and all that sort of stuff. So, I think we'll call it at that. To be honest, I'll maybe leave you with one more question actually. So you've got a lot of things coming up in the near future. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time from now?
Cool, great question. I've funnily just written that down in a plan. So 5 years' time, well, this business is going to grow significantly. And by 5 years, I can see myself having around about 600 people signed up to this per month. And I can see us having our own gym open. One thing that Laura, my partner, and I have discussed a few times is going into our own business together, starting our own food preparation company, which I think is, again, something we're going to be looking into. So by 5 years' time, I think there's going to be multiple businesses on the go. I'm going to be married and nicely settled into our own home with a dog, maybe 3. And I think in terms of life, well, I've got a lot of challenges and various sort of athlete, if you like, things coming up this next couple of years. And I think I want to do something pretty big. And I had in my mind for quite a long time the Ironman World Champions. And okay, I'm not there to do it now, but within sort of 3 or 4 years, I think that's a viable option. And that was something that's still on the back of my mind, and still, it's kind of been put on the back burner for the last year because the last year has been up and down everywhere. I just haven't had time to think about it. But I think that's still going to find its way into my radar, just because I love doing these big challenges and going out and doing my own endurance stuff. But I think sometimes it's important to scratch the itch if it's there, to just pit yourself against other people, see how you get on. And again, in my sort of naivety to it, was like, well, I grew up watching Trans World Sports and the Ironman World Champions, and I thought, well, maybe I could do that. And again, of the books that I listen to, there's a book, Fred, I can't remember the title, but it's Chrissy Wellington, Ironman triathlete, Ironman World Champions autobiography. Fantastic book, really, really good listen, very inspiring. And I listened to that and I thought, maybe I could do Ironman. So I think in 4 or 5 years' time, I think that's going to be on the cards. Whether it's a race as a professional or whether it's a very competitive age grouper, I'm not sure. I don't know the path, to be honest, to get into the professionals, but we'll see what happens. We'll see where the business goes. We'll see how my time goes, see how the training goes, and see, how your mindset develops. But I think that sort of trying to set a standard against other people and actually see where the last years of slightly masochistic adventures have gone and what that has done to my body, how that has adapted and improved my physical ability, to then pit it against the best in the world. I think that would be a really cool goal. Awesome, man. You've got the potential, you've got the knowledge, and you know how to apply that knowledge. So I think you should go for it, man. Just start taking those steps, and you'll get there. You'll get there. Oh, you got to try something with life, eh? Yeah, you've got to, man. You've got to give it all you've got. Make the most 100%. Of it. So, and definitely get the dogs. Man. You won't regret that. Yes. Yeah, 100%. Just make sure you time it well with your Ironman training, because you might struggle to fit Ironman training and dogs when they're pushing and stuff. So, yeah, good stuff, man. Ben, where can all the listeners reach you? So we're High Performance Ben, is that right, on Instagram? Yeah, so High Performance Ben on Instagram. That's probably where I'm most active. LinkedIn, I do a bunch of stuff as well. That's a bit more sort of businessy. Facebook I'm on, but I'm not overly active. And YouTube, I'm trying to drive more traffic to, because that's something I aspire to build more this year. So I'm going to try and put out more educational content, long form videos, actually teach people good stuff, which YouTube is the platform for. So I'd head to YouTube. There's a big sort of archive of previous videos on there, or Instagram would be a good start, I think. Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Well, thanks for your time, and it's been a great chat with you. It's great to finally sit down and do this, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. There's loads we could chat about on here. So. Oh, 100%. More than happy. Yeah, great. Awesome, man. So thanks everybody for listening to the podcast today. Hope you enjoyed Ben and I chatting about crazy endurance events and nutrition. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below.
either Ben or myself will get back to you. Feel free to get in touch with either of us when it comes to nutrition, endurance training, whatever. Just give us a shout and we'll try and point in the right direction. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify, and also on the YouTube channel as well. We're going to have more conversations just like this. And hopefully we'll get you on again soon, Ben. So thanks again, man.
100%. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Have a great day, and we'll speak to you real soon, man.
Nice one. Speak to you soon. Cheers, Chris.
Ben, thanks.